guy named Roger is attracted to a woman named Diane, and he asks her out to a movie. She accepts, and they have a pretty good time. A few nights later, he asks her out to dinner, and again, they enjoy themselves. They continue to see each other regularly, and for a while, neither one of them is seeing anybody else. And then one evening, when they're driving home, a thought occurs to Diane, and without really thinking, she says it aloud.
Do you realize that as of tonight, we've been seeing each other for exactly 6 months?
And then there's a silence in the car. To Diane, it seems like a very loud silence, and she thinks to herself,
Gee, I wonder if it bothers him that I said that. Maybe he's been feeling confined by our relationship. Maybe he thinks I'm trying to push him into some kind of obligation that he doesn't want, or isn't sure of.
And Roger is thinking,
gee, 6 months.
And Diane is thinking,
but hey, I'm not so sure I want this kind of relationship either. Sometimes I wish I had a little more space, so I'd have time to think about whether I really want us to keep going the way we are, moving steadily toward, where are we going? Are we just going to keep seeing each other at this level of intimacy? Are we heading toward marriage, toward children, toward a lifetime together? Am I ready for that level of commitment? Do I really even know this person?
And Roger is thinking,
well, that means, let's see, February, which was right after I got the car at the dealers. Which means, let me check the odometer. Oh, I'm overdue for an oil change.
And Diane is thinking,
he's upset. I can see it on his face. Maybe I'm reading this completely wrong. Maybe he wants more from our relationship, more intimacy, more commitment. Maybe he has sensed, even before I sensed it, that I was feeling some reservations. Yes, I bet that's it. That's why he's so reluctant to say anything about his own feelings. He's afraid of being rejected.
And Roger is thinking,
I'm going to have them look at the transmission again. I'm say it's shifting right. And they're going to try to blame it on the weather this time. What's cold weather? It's 87 degrees out. And this thing is shifting like a garbage truck. And I paid those incompetent thieves $6,000.
And Diane is thinking,
he's angry, and I don't blame him. I'd be angry too. I feel so guilty putting him through this, but I can't help the way I feel. I'm just not sure.
And Roger's thinking,
they'll probably say it's only a 90-day warranty. That's exactly what I'm saying.
And Diane is thinking,
maybe I'm just too idealistic, waiting for a knight to come riding up on his white horse when I'm sitting right next to a perfectly good person, a person I enjoy being with, a person I truly do care about, and a person who seems to truly care about me, a person who is in pain because of my self-centered schoolgirl romantic fantasy.
And Roger's thinking,
warranty? You want a warranty? I'll give him a warranty. I'll take the warranty and stick it right up there.
Roger?
What?
Please don't torture yourself like this. She says.
I'm sorry, she says with her eyes beginning to brim with tears.
Maybe I should never have. Oh, I feel so.
And she breaks down sobbing.
What?
I'm such a fool. I know there's no knight. I really know that. It's silly. There's no knight and there's no horse.
There's no horse?
You think I'm a fool, don't you?
No!
Roger says, finally glad to know the correct answer.
It's just that. It's that I need some time.
And there's a 15 seconds pause while Roger, thinking as fast as he can, tries to come up with a safe response. Finally, he comes up with one that he thinks might work.
Okay.
Diane is deeply moved, and she touches his hand.
Do you really feel that way?
What way?
That way about time.
Oh, yeah.
Diane turns to face him and gazes deeply into his eyes, causing him to become very nervous about what she might say next, especially if it's about a horse. At last she speaks.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you.
Then he takes her home, and she lies on her bed, a conflicted, tortured soul, and weeps until dawn. Whereas when Roger gets back to his place, he opens a bag of Doritos, turns on the TV, and immediately becomes deeply involved in a rerun of a tennis match between two Czechoslovakians he's never heard of. A tiny voice in the far recesses of his mind tells him that something major was going on back there in the car, but he's pretty sure that there's no way he would ever understand what, and so he figures it's better if he doesn't think about it. And this is also Roger's policy regarding world hunger. The next day, Diane will call her closest friend, or perhaps two of them, and they'll talk about the situation for 6 straight hours. In painstaking detail, they will analyze everything she said and everything he said, going over it time and time again, exploring every word, expression, and gesture for nuances of meaning, considering every possible ramification. They will continue to discuss this subject on and off for weeks, maybe months, never reaching any definite conclusion, but never getting bored with it either. Meanwhile, while playing racquetball one day with a mutual friend of his and Diane's, Roger will pause just before serving, frown, and say,
Norm, did Diane ever own a horse?
That's it. Thank you very much. Okay, so what's the point of that? The point is that men and women experience the world quite differently, in case you haven't noticed. And so the point of this talk is to talk about the differences between men and women. This is something that's becoming harder and harder for people to understand. There's all sorts of ideologies that are challenging this. They've been challenging it for a while in different ways. But the reality is that men and women are different in very important ways, in ways that matter. There are some differences between human beings that don't matter, like the color of your hair. But there are some differences that do matter, and the difference between men and women is a difference, you could say, that makes the difference. When you say this is true, many people get upset, people get worried. A good example of this is Larry Summers. Larry Summers was the president of Harvard University. He made some off-the-record remarks at a private meeting of different academics that perhaps some of the reasons that women aren't filling up the hard science programs is that, for one thing, they're less interested, and secondly, they're not scoring as well in the hard sciences. By saying this, it made people so upset that within a year he was fired. By the way, he was reporting what is actually accurate and true. So why does the truth frighten people? Mona Sharon, who writes a whole book about this, she says the truth frightens people because they worry that the differences between males and females, discovered by biology, anthropology, neurology, will be cited as proof of women's inferiority to men. Their fear is not groundless, but it is outdated. Another author, Ann Meyer, she writes in a book called Brain Sex, it's usually better to act on the basis of what is true rather than maintain that with the best will in the world that what is true has no right to be so. So I've been thinking about this a lot lately, knowing that I'm going to be teaching it here tonight and also back in Phoenix. And I really think what motivates people is deep down they have two completely different views of reality, of nature, of truth. If my view is that ultimately life is really unfair, life is really cruel, and nature is really messed up, then I'm going to be at war with it, I'm not going to like it, I'm not going to want to hear it, and I'm going to resist it. But if my view is that, you know what, the world can be unfair, and the world does have problems, but ultimately God is good, He created us good, our nature is good, my body is good, this design must be good, then I'm going to be curious, I'm going to want to know the truth, I'm not going to want to hide from the truth. And so this is where the church's teaching lies. The church is not afraid of the truth. The church embraces what the sciences teach. The church has always embraced what the sciences teach about men and women, about the differences of men and women. And overall, my main point in this talk is going to be, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of discovering what's true. Don't be afraid of what psychologists have learned. Don't be afraid of what neuroscientists have learned. Don't be afraid of what every culture has known since the beginning of time, that men and women are different and very important in beautiful ways. Okay, so to learn a little bit more about the differences between men and women, I think a helpful way to do this is to think about Aristotle's 4 causes. So Aristotle explains that everything has 4 reasons or 4 causes. The formal cause is what it is in its nature, right? Its essence, its identity. The efficient cause is how something came to be over time. The material cause is what it's made of, the matter. And then the final cause is the why, the purpose. Right, so with the statue, you can see the formal cause, the sculptor is thinking of the formal cause in his mind. He has the idea of what he wants to create. The material cause would be the big slab of marble. The efficient cause would be him carving it. And then the final cause would be to honor the soldier by displaying it in this public arena. So we get this? So the final cause is the why. Now what's interesting is what occurs first of these 4, which occurs first in time. I'm going to let you answer this. Which one of these would have occurred first? Anyone? Good, the final cause would occur first. The reason, right? The purpose. Somebody was like, we should honor the soldier. Well, how should we honor him? How about a piñata? Keep thinking. How about a statue? Now that's a good idea. Let's make a statue of him. So first came the final cause, and then the formal cause, the idea, right? And then you would get the slab of marble, and then they bring that idea into reality. Okay. So, which came first? It's a great question. And then skip it from that. So these are sketches from an artist that you might recognize. He's one of the Mutant Ninja Turtles. So it's Michelangelo. Right? So this is the creation of Adam. The reason I show these sketches is because which came first? See, we would say, well, the sketches, the rough drafts came first. Right? But actually, wouldn't the last one have come first in Michelangelo's mind? Wouldn't he have already kind of known what he wanted to begin with? And he's kind of working that out over time? Right? It's like if you try to write a paper or even write a paragraph or a sentence. You know what you want to say, and it takes a while before you get it just right. So you could say the formal cause, the what it is, existed first before it actually occurred in time. The what he wanted to create always was there in Michelangelo's mind, even though these others came first in history. People could see the rough drafts first, but that last one is actually what kind of always existed in Michelangelo's mind, even if it was in a vague way. So I'd say in a similar way, yes, these came first in time chronologically, but if God knew from the beginning that he wanted to create man, didn't he kind of know all along what we were going to look like? Didn't he kind of know all along what he had in mind? Right, so you can say the evolution of the species, you see these different appearances of these different species or different ages, but really it's all leading up to that final product, right, which is the human form. So in a sense, it's not that we get our shape, not that we get our body from our ancestors, it's that they get their bodies from us, because they're kind of like the rough drafts. Right? God knew from the beginning he wanted us to have faces. He knew from the beginning he wanted us to look upright, right? To be able to be in conversation, not looking down like cows or gazelle at the food, but looking upright in conversation and relationship. Right? He knew from the beginning what he wanted to create, and what he wanted to create is really miraculous. We take it for granted. He wanted to create physical persons. He wanted to create something that is a someone. Right? And it's, again, we take this for granted because we're surrounded by someones all the time. And so that's why it's helpful to kind of step back for a minute and think of all the stuff in the world, all the beautiful things we could look at. But nothing is a person. Nothing has a spiritual soul except the human form. So God is not physical. God is pure spirit, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. God's not male. Right? We call him Father, Son, Holy Spirit, but these are images. Right? God is a first person loving the second person loving the third person, and the third person proceeding from the love of the first and second person, Blessed Trinity. And in God's generosity, God's happy. Right? He's happy because of this Trinity of persons, because of this communion of love. He's so infinitely happy, he decided to create us not out of any need, but because he was like, this is so good, someone else should experience this. It's like when you hear the song for the first time, you want to share it, right? When something's just so good, you want to share it with others. God had the goodness of relationship, the goodness of love, the goodness of this happy family. It's like someone else should experience this. Let's create someone who can. And in his brilliance, he decided to create physical someones, right? Physical persons. So only man has a rational intellect and free will. Only human beings have a spiritual nature. We have that spiritual nature for the sake of love. Right? A duck can't love, a tuna can't love, a human being can love because of our spiritual nature. So these are in our nature for that purpose, and we only find our happiness through loving others. But our body itself also reveals the person. Okay, so it's not just that we have a spirit that's what makes us dignified. Our body reveals that we have a spirit. So both these quotes come from John Paul II. So he says, and I don't know if I have a quote here from the body, in fact, in it alone is capable of making visible what is invisible. The spiritual and the divine is created to transfer into the visible reality of the world the mystery hidden since time immemorial in God, and thus to be a sign of it. So the human body reveals a person. How so? In infinite ways. But I would say in particular through the face. Right? The human face has more muscles than any other animal. This is why whenever they do like pretty much any cartoon or Pixar movie with animals, they always have to totally mess with their faces and give them muscles and features they don't have. Right? What clownfish who can smile with big teeth and eyebrows and eyelids, right? When you see a real clownfish, you're like, that doesn't look like Nemo. Why? Because they have to kind of really mess with that animal to make them look like a person, right? To make them look like a someone and not just a something. So the human body reveals a someone. The human body reveals that when you see this someone, it's unlike anything else. This is why it's weird to look at anything. Excuse me, it's not weird to look at anything else, but it is weird to look at a person, right? Like when you stop at a light, red light, and you turn to the side. If there's a dog, fine. If there's a mountain, fine. But if there's a person looking at you, that's a completely different experience, right? It's a totally different experience. So the spousal meaning of the body. The spousal, now John Paul talks not just that we're persons, but that we're male and female persons. He calls this the spousal meaning of the body. The spousal meaning of the body is the capacity of expressing love. The love precisely in which the man person becomes a gift. By means of this gift, he fulfills the very meaning of his being and existence. So God isn't just personal. God is a communion of loving persons. And so when he created us, he didn't just create individual persons. He created individual persons that were made to love others. And you can see that we're made to love others through our male and femaleness. So again, just to reiterate, the Father loves the Son loves the Father. Through their mutual exchange, the third person proceeds. This is why in the Creed we say about the Holy Spirit who proceeds from the Father and the Son. And in a similar way, a man loves a woman. The woman receives the love of the man, reciprocates that love, and through that loving exchange, through that gift of self, of two persons, a third person proceeds. So God desires each of us to be created in this mutual love of the husband and the wife, of the father and the mother. Now, are we always created in this way? No, of course not. And this in no way changes our dignity. But it is the divine plan that we're created through love, that we're created through this act of love. And this man finds his happiness, and this woman finds her happiness through a gift of self. Because by giving themselves, they find the joy of loving their spouse, and they also find the joy of loving their child. Now, the differences the church calls complementarity and reciprocity. So this is a really important point. Men and women are different, but we shouldn't be afraid of the differences. Why? Because the differences enrich each other. The men and women were made for each other. So complementarity and reciprocity. So there are certain things that men tend to be more interested in and able at, which also tend to be the things that women are not usually as capable at, but at the same time they don't really care as much about. And vice versa. The things that women really think about a lot and talk about a lot and are good at, right, men usually just aren't as interested in. I was talking about this today and I was telling all my students, remember your kindergarten teacher? Remember your first grade teacher? Remember his name? Right? Very rarely is it a man. Or remember, kindergarten, first day of school, you run and you scrape your knee, you wipe out, and who picks you up? The nurse. The nurse comes and picks you up, makes you feel better. Like, thanks, Nurse Bruce. No, right? And so why is it that, little kindergartners is usually a woman? Because for one thing, she's more interested in doing that. And men, can they do it? Yes, but usually they're like, I'd rather find something else to do. So again, it's not, and as we're going to see, it's not that one is better than the other, it's that there are differences, and these differences enrich each other. Okay, so it's complementarity and reciprocity. So John Paul explains, this complementarity and reciprocity emerges in every context of coexistence. In the unity of the two, I wrote my apostolic letter, Miliaris Dignitatis, the dignity of women. Man and woman are called from the beginning not just to exist side by side or together, but they're also called to exist mutually one for the other, right? We were made for one another, right? There's a richness that women bring to the society, bring to the culture, bring to whatever, to the classroom. And there's a richness that men bring, and the two complement each other. Okay, so let's talk about what those differences are. So we can see these differences, by the way. So for a long time, people say, oh, well, the only reason we're different is because of culture. It's just a product of culture. If you would just raise someone as a boy, they'd be a boy. If you raise them as a girl, they'd be a girl. Dr. John Money is the first one who said this, and he did some really dangerous stuff in the 60s. And we know more and more that's simply not true. And one of the ways we can tell this is not true is because of babies. Okay? Babies aren't exposed to culture. Right? Babies are not the product of the culture. They're babies. And we can even see this in the womb now. The brand new study, April 2019, MRI scans of I think 115 different infants in the womb, and they can see baby girls in the womb and baby boys in the womb. Their brains are already different. Their brains are already wired differently. And that's not because they're exposed to Disney, right? It's not Disney like, changing their attitudes about things. So men and women, on average, differ in size, on average in shape, in bone length, in density, in fat distribution, in musculature, in many other ways. Right? This should be obvious to all, but a lot of people deny what's obvious. And I don't know why they deny this. Again, I think it's ultimately they're just afraid of the truth. Mona Sharon's got this great quote. She says, "It's inexplicable why some feminists choose to contest whether men, on average, are physically stronger than women." So they say, no, men aren't stronger than women. She says it's confusing why they do this, especially when they're trying to prove how smart they are. Right? It's obvious. On average, that's the case. So, this is why we have the gender reveal parties, and you don't wait until the baby's been assigned at birth. The sex has been revealed before they're even born. So let's do a little quiz. Oh, I want to show you that. So here's the quiz. Ready? True or false? At birth, the female brain is more mature than the male brain. True. According to neuropsychiatrist Newman, Brizendine, it's true a girl has literally a head start over members of the opposite sex. And her brain will develop faster than that of a boy by 1 to 2 years. This is why, if you remember grade school, usually the girls were a little bit more ready for school and a little bit more mature. True or false? Men have larger skulls than women. True or false? Men have larger skulls than women. I need an answer. True. It is true. True or false? Men have more brain cells than women. Larger skulls, more brain cells, true or false? False. Women have just as many brain cells, but they're packed more tightly into their smaller skulls. And this author says that clears up some of the issues. Women's brain cells have less room to wander off and do stupid things. True or false? Women have more neurons than men in the brain centers for language. True. As a result, women are naturally more talkative than men. Women use an average of 20,000 words a day, where men speak an average of 7,000 words. It's funny because it's true. Okay, let's go on. True or false? Pregnancy causes a woman's brain to grow larger. False. The brain actually shrinks during the last 3 months of pregnancy, but it returns to normal size 6 months after a woman gives birth. No comment. Material resources or social status. False. In a study of 10,000 individuals in 37 countries, women in every culture look more for social and financial independence than visual appeal. Okay, true or false? Breastfeeding can make a woman absent-minded. True. Breastfeeding can extend an intensity of mental fogginess that many women experience after giving birth. I don't know why that one's in there, it has nothing to do with brains. Okay, so men's brains in general, you probably read about this, are compartmentalized. The connections are within each hemisphere. So men generally do, when they're thinking with one part of their brain, while women are thinking with both parts of their brain at the same time. Okay, so, and I need to be able to read these notes. So let's go through this. So that's just what it looks like as far as connectedness. So the male brain is highly systematized with an ability to compartmentalize and a low ability to multitask. So men are really good at focusing on one thing and forgetting everything else. Okay. So this is a blessing because you can focus and get your work done. But it's a curse because you can forget that you were supposed to be somewhere, or you're supposed to call someone, or that you have people in your life, right? A high ability to control emotions, which is good or bad? Yes, it's good, but sometimes it's bad because somebody might say, you aren't as upset as you're supposed to be right now. A low relational orientation, so men in general aren't thinking about relationships. I was asking my students today, if you see a bunch of dads at the barbecue talking, what are they talking about? Sports, football, cars. If you see a bunch of moms talking, what are they talking about? Yeah, we're talking about my daughter, and they went to this, oh no, they should meet each other. Right? And so it's funny, we say that women gossip, and that men don't, but here's the thing, women gossip and men don't, it's because women talk more than men, 3 times as much. But men do gossip, they're just gossiping about other things, right? Where women are like talking about people and, oh, did you see so-and-so? Men are like, did you see the new Mustang? Ridiculous, right? Or Brady, I'm so glad that he lost, right? So they're gossiping, but they're gossiping about cars and sports, and they're being just as nasty. It's just not about people they know. So a high project orientation. Men love projects, a high ability to zone out. A tendency to act first and think later when faced with stress. An aggressive response to risk, and a tendency to compete with other males. All of these are why auto insurance is higher for young men than women. The female brain is highly empathetic with a low ability to compartmentalize. So why is that a good thing, that women can't compartmentalize? They can't stop thinking about things. They remember things, which is good, right? They're good at multitasking. Why is it a curse? Stress, anxiety. Women are much more likely to have anxiety than men. Right? I guarantee you, everyone in this room, one of you is still mad at somebody from high school. I'm sorry, ladies, you're still mad at somebody from high school. Correct? Or if you're like a senior here, you're still mad at somebody from freshman year at NAU, right, ladies? Okay, so they don't forget. A high relational orientation, so women think about relationships. A low project orientation, a low ability to zone out, a tendency to think and feel before acting in response to stress, a cautious response to risk, and a tendency to cooperate with other females. Now that tendency to cooperate doesn't mean they do, it's just that they want to. Women don't like it when they're not getting along. Right? Men are like, whatever, you're an idiot. Differences in communications. Okay, so while men's conversations tend to focus on facts, women's conversations tend to emphasize the feelings behind the facts. Men solve problems best by thinking about one issue at a time, usually on their own, but women generally need to talk through problems with someone else to process their thoughts. Men approach situations with a strong desire to make a decision and take action, whereas women sometimes just want to talk about how they feel about those same situations. And so this is something men have to learn, is like, stop trying to fix a problem and just listen. Men tend to speak directly and use words literally, sometimes called bluntly, while women tend to speak indirectly, which is annoying. Right? And so this conversation, why didn't you just tell me? And her response, I shouldn't have to. Men are motivated by conquest. They tend to define themselves by their work and their accomplishments. Women are motivated by nurture. They tend to define themselves by people for whom they care. I think the best proof of this is profile pictures. Right? Men show themselves in all their glory, holding up the big fish they caught, right? Or like, look me on my motorcycle or my car, or rocking out on my guitar, or my big shoulder pads looking tough. And women are like, look at all the people who love me and who I love, right? Am I correct? Okay. So, and this is great. This is how we define ourselves. So all of these are good news, right? These aren't bad. It's that it's different, right? And that they're gifts. And so the man sees in the woman things that he doesn't have, and he finds those things attractive. And so she has her gifts, he has his gifts, and they're both gifts to each other, and they're both gifts to the child. Now please know, all of these things that I'm talking about, these are all secondary qualities, right? These are things that we notice, they're in general. Does that mean every man is bad at multitasking? No. Does that mean that women are always more emotional? No. But in general, we see these things, right? They're generalities. Why? Because this is the way nature kind of designed men and women for their purpose, right? What really makes us a man, what really makes us a woman, is a woman can be a mother, a man can be a father. Right? This is really, and even if, let's say I can't be a father anymore, my body was still organized for fatherhood. A woman's body was organized for motherhood. Right? So these things are all secondary, but they're fun to talk about because we see how true they are. Okay, so John Paul II, though, says this isn't just biology, this isn't just neurology, he says this is ontology. This goes to the core of the person. That we're not just persons with bodies, we're body persons, right? We're not just persons who happen to have a male body, like you're driving around like that kind of car, or like you're driving around that kind of vehicle. Our body expresses our person. So St. Therese is still a woman in heaven, right? St. Joseph is still a man in heaven. He doesn't have his body right now, but he is a man. Right? And so our soul is expressed through our body. The body is imperfect, as we know, and so it imperfectly expresses our soul, but this difference isn't simply biological. This difference is also ontological. Okay, and so John Paul points out that this is for the sake of love, because we're not just supposed to love with our mind, we're not just supposed to love with our body, we're supposed to love with our full person. Right? And our maleness is a way of loving. Our femaleness is a way of loving. We have different gifts so that we can love in different ways. Right? So the strengths of a woman are her gift to the man. The strengths of the man is a gift to the woman. And so this is for the sake of, if you studied love, there's different kinds of love. Eros is one kind of love, the attractive love, right? And so the man sees in the woman her strengths and he finds those beautiful and attractive, right? And so it makes him want to be with her because she's got something he doesn't have, right? She's got skills, she's got talents, she's got this beauty, this charm that he doesn't have. The woman sees in the man something attractive, something that she doesn't have, right? And so it's for the sake to get us out of ourselves. God did not make us to be independent. God made us to be communal, to be loving. And so we find in the other something attractive, but then we also find in ourselves, hey, I've got something I can give to this person, right? So she's so cute, I really want to be with her. Oh, she hates bugs. I can kill bugs. I can do this, right? And so now I realize I've got a power. I've got this strength, and this strength is a gift, right? So we should not be afraid of these strengths and weaknesses. The whole point of them is for the sake of love, to get us out of ourselves, to get us to be interested in the other, but also so that we can discover that we can be a gift to the other person. Right? The strengths of women are supposed to be a gift to a man. The strengths of man are supposed to be a gift to a woman. And of course, both of them, their strengths are the gift to the child. So what the mother provides for the child is unique. What the father provides for the child is unique. Now, what single moms do is amazing, right? But what makes it so amazing is they're doing it without the contribution of the father, right? What single dads do is amazing. But what's particularly amazing is that they're doing it without the contribution of the mother. Right? So in no way I'm trying to put down their work. It's amazing what they do. But men provide something unique. There's something about dad talking to you. There's something about dad giving you a compliment. There's something about dad giving you a warning that's different than mom. Right? There's something about mom holding you that's different than dad. And so even though dads can do what moms do, they can't do them as moms do them. Right? Does that make sense? And moms can't do, they can do what dads do, but not as a dad does it. Why? Because our being, it comes from our being. We act from our being. And so God created us this way on purpose. God said, let us make man in our own image and the likeness of God. So God created man in his own image, in the image of God. He created them, male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. I want to point out two things. The blessing is twofold here. Male and female is a blessing. We're in the image of God. Male and femaleness, our diversity is a blessing. But then our fertility is a blessing. And this is when everything was perfect. And then what happens? We sin. So then we get the consequence. To the woman, God said, I will greatly multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. So the first blessing, fertility, is now wounded. Is childbirth evil? No, it's still good, but it's broken. It's wounded. And then he says, yet your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. What is he talking about here? So the first blessing is wounded. Childbirth is wounded. The other blessing is now wounded too. They were this perfect couple where they looked at each other with nothing but love. Their strengths were always gifts. Now, your strength is not always going to be a gift. It can be a weapon. Right? So this perfect harmony, the diversity, the difference which is good, now those differences will be weapons. Okay. So the strengths of a man, which is supposed to be a gift to the woman, now he says, hey, I can use this strength to my advantage. Right? When he sees the weakness of the woman, it's supposed to be, oh, I can help her. But now it's, haha, I'm stronger than her. I can take advantage of her. In the same way, the woman sees the weakness of the man. She sees how pathetic he is, and it's not, oh, he's so pathetic, I'll help him. It's, he's an idiot. I can totally mess with him. I can get what I want. Right? And so now our strengths, instead of being a gift, we see them as a weapon. And now instead of weaknesses being a call to love, we see it as an ability to manipulate, an ability to dominate. And this isn't just between men and women. This is between human beings, period. Right? If we have physical strength, it's supposed to be a gift. If we have emotional strength, it's supposed to be a gift. If we have intelligence, if we have wealth, whatever it is, all of our strengths are supposed to be gifts. Think about when you see a child. You think, oh, I want to help them. But then there are some people out there who say, haha, I can take advantage because they're weak. Right? Or elderly. We see them, oh, it's so sad, I want to help them. And some think, haha, that's the person I can rip off. Right? So all of our strengths are always supposed to be gifts, but yet now, because of the fall, unfortunately, very often, we use them as weapons. And so we experience not only the other person as someone we can use, but we also experience our body differently as well. Right? We come to hate our bodies. We come to not appreciate our bodies. We come to think my body is bad. Right? And so the fall really has screwed things up royally. Right? Is it totally broken? No. The world is still good. Sexuality is still good. Men and women are still good. Complementarity is still good. But it is wounded. But it's important that we know this truth, because the more we know about the truth of our nature, the more we can live the way God has called us to live. So, feminism has been a response to this. Feminism is very much a response to what? The brokenness of complementarity. Right? Throughout history, men have dominated women. And feminists resist this, rightly so. They should. Right? Men are not better than women. Men should not be dominating women. And so this is a good thing. And so luckily, especially the first feminists, the first wave of feminism, they pushed for the right to vote because they said, look, all of us are equally human. No one can be more human than another. Men are equally human than women, and women are just as human as men. And second wave feminists did the same thing. They said we're all equal, and they pushed for the rights of pay, the rights of equality as far as school and opportunity, and they very much have succeeded in many ways. Not only are there more, you guys know this, there's more women in college than men. There's also a brand new study, just came out last week. There are now more women in the workforce than men in the workforce. Right? It's amazing. So I don't know if that's good or not, but that's the fact. So these accomplishments have been good, but there have been problems. And so there's what's called the new feminism. The new feminism takes what's good from the second wave feminism, the feminism in the 60s and 70s, but they resist some of their fundamental premises. The second wave feminists, in order to combat the inequality of men and women, said men and women are the same. They resist that men and women are different. And so it's understandable why. They see these differences, and those differences have been used to the advantage of men. And so they say, we're not different. Stop saying we're different. Those are lies. The new feminists say, okay, we are different. Let's be honest here. Don't be afraid of saying we're different. We are different. Injustice is not cool, but don't say things that aren't true. We are different. So the new feminists have another attitude. Their attitude is, let's embrace these differences. Let's not try to act like men. So the new feminism also is very much pro-life, like the original feminists were pro-life. The second wave feminists were not. They saw abortion as necessary because they thought this is part of achieving our goal of power, and our goal of being able to work and make more money is abortion. Where the new feminists say, no, this isn't really what we want, and stop speaking for us as if we really want this, because we don't want this, right? We love children, we love having children. Careers are good, but not if it means sacrificing a child. So the new feminism is specifically pro-life, intentionally pro-life. So this just comes from a mission statement to give you a taste of the new feminism. The mission statement says, I'm going to move over here. So we, the women of the new feminism movement, come together on this site or page to unite our causes in the following principles. We come together to liberate women, notice, in her naturally designed femininity. not only from a masculinization, but from the degradation of the sexual object. So they feel that the second wave feminists very much try to masculinize men, and women, excuse me. In other words, men are pigs, will be pigs. Men are good at this, will be good at that. Men are interested in these things, will be interested in these things. In other words, they felt like they're just kind of selling out by copying men and trying to beat men at their own game. The new feminists say, we're not interested in all those things. And we're interested in the things that we're interested in. And also the degradation of women as a sexual object. This is another problem with the second wave feminists, is they saw sex as casual. Sex is not a big deal. Men treat sex casually, we'll treat sex casually. Where most women, that's not really what they want. They don't really want casual sex. They want intimacy. They want commitment. The next one, we believe that women have a unique voice and role in protecting the dignity of the human person and creating a culture that values the life of every person. So women in particular show empathy. Women in particular are compassionate. Men, unfortunately, in particular, have the tendency to be more aggressive, to be more violent. Just to give you an example, for every one woman in prison, there's 15 women. Excuse me, I said that. There's 15 men in prison. For every one woman who commits murder, 30 to 40 men who commit murder. Right? So men, unfortunately, are willing to do things that most women would not. And so the new feminists say we need to have more of a voice speaking out for what we care about, which is, for one thing, protecting life. By the way, men commit murder, but women watch TV shows about men committing murder and listen to podcasts about men committing. What true crime podcast? It's like 75% women listeners, and then Dateline NBC, which is like every housewife's favorite TV show. Okay, so where was I? A culture that values life of every person, regardless of race, age, gender, physical ability, faith, or any other category invoked to dominate or marginalize. So if you look at most occupations that involve caring for other human beings, it's dominated by women. Right? Women are much more involved in social work, they're much more involved in primary education and special education. Actually, veterinary medicine, almost no men get into this. Women just want to help others. They want to help people to feel better, including animals. We reject the imitation of masculine models of success and domination and acknowledge and affirm the true genius of women in every aspect of society. So this is huge. They're saying, look, for us, success is not necessarily making more money or having a more impressive job, right? Status and conquest, that's a male thing. For us, success is, am I making a difference in the lives of the people that I love? For us, success is really about nurture and about helping others. It's not so much always about money and power. I mean, for some people that's true, but for most women, that's not really what they're looking for. We embrace a wide variety of projects that seek to achieve the true equality and incorporation of the feminine throughout society. And we seek to introduce a new paradigm of feminism whereby women and the female virtues, empathy, interpersonal relations, emotive capacity, subjectivity, communication, intuition, and personalization are valued and fundamental to the health and sustainability of the human family. So one of I think the strongest arguments of the new feminists is, look, if men and women are essentially the same, then what difference does it make whether there's more men in this or it's all men as far as a business? If we're all the same, who cares? But if men and women are different, then we need to have women's voices because women are going to bring to the table something that's different. If you have a jury that's all male, who cares if we're all the same? Nobody would say, hey, that jury, there's no redheads, right? If we're not really different, who cares? But if we are different, that's a better argument to say you need to have the voices of men and women because women bring to the table something unique, something different. If we have a Congress that's all male, who cares? Does that make sense? If we're not different, what difference does it make? But if we are different, then it does make a difference. And you need to have women. That doesn't mean you have to have 50-50 on everything, but you need to have the voices of both men and women, especially in decision-making policies and institutions, because they're going to see things differently. They're going to have different voices, different perspectives, different talents, different gifts. I think this is one of the strongest and smartest arguments of the new feminism, that complementarity is an argument for equality. Complementarity is an argument why we need the voices of both men and women, because we're different. Okay, I got some cute videos here. Can I show them? How much time do we get? Some time? All right, so this is, I love this video. This is about the amazing work that moms do. So one of the problems with the new feminism is they saw very much that the work that women do at home is unimportant, and having children is a bad thing. Marriage is always bad, right? Almost, by the way, almost none of the second wave feminists, none of the second wave feminists, the prominent ones, had a successful marriage. And very few of them had children. And so they really taught, and so this was the new feminists say, look, marriage actually is important to us. We like marriage and we like kids. And so this little video talks about the importance that stay-at-home moms do. There's more. So, G.K. Chesterton has this great quote about the work that mothers do. He says, "To be Queen Elizabeth within a definite area, deciding sales, banquets, labors, and holidays, to be Aristotle within a certain area, teaching morals, manners, theology, and hygiene. I can't imagine how this can exhaust the mind. But I can't imagine that. I cannot imagine how other people, cannot imagine how it could narrow it. How can it be a large career to tell other people about the rule of three and a small career to tell one's own children about the universe? How can it be broad to be the same thing to everyone and narrow to be everything to someone? No, a mother's function is laborious, but because it is gigantic, not because it is minute." Right? And this is one of the main points of the new feminism, is that, look, this work, we act as if this is not important. That's a male bias. Right? That's selling out, saying that the work of parenthood, the work of taking care of your children is somehow less important than, having a big job or having a corner office. Uh-oh, it's not going forward for me. Click. Okay, another one. Get ready for the waterworks. So compare that to a quote by Betty Friedan, one of the most important second-wave feminists. She had a chapter in a book, The Feminine Mystique. The chapter was called The Comfortable Concentration Camp, and it's about stay-at-home moms. Right? And she compared the dehumanization of housewives to the Jews in Nazi concentration camps. Another quote, "No woman should be authorized to stay at home to bring up her children. Society should be totally different. Women should not have that choice, precisely because if there is such a choice, too many women will make that choice." Right? So the second-wave feminists saw this as unacceptable. This is totally wrong, and they can't have children. This is why they're so pro-abortion, because they saw children as keeping women down, and this is why they're against marriage. Marriage was just patriarchy. Right? One of the arguments of the new feminists, though, is not only that this is good for women, but that women need to teach men, hey, stop working 80-hour weeks, stop acting as if having a big career is the most important thing. Your fatherhood is what matters most. Okay, so let's do this video. One more report. Oh, did I miss one? Shoot. Did I miss one? No. Keep going. Maybe I put it in there somewhere I don't know about.
That never shone on me.
We're going to run out of time. So let me just give some recommendations about some books, because I know that these issues are things that you hear about in school, and I know this is all over campuses. So some recommendations. First of all, John Paul II, he wrote a lot about women, but his most famous one is his Multiralis Dignitat on the dignity of women. He also wrote a letter to women. There's also a reader called Women, Sex, and the Church, edited by Erica Batiaki, and she has many different authors in this, and it's all about these issues, all about the new feminism and their teachings. Really, really good articles in this book. Bishop Olmsted, for men, wrote a book or a letter called Into the Breach, which I highly recommend. Actually should be required reading for any Catholic man. Let's see if this would work for me. From some secular authors, Mona Sharon, I used some of her information. She just wrote a book last year called Sex Matters, talking about the differences between men and women. Unprotected is by Miriam Grossman. Every woman here should get a copy of this book. It's about, so Miriam Grossman was a UCLA counselor. She worked in like the health office, or like the nursing, doing psychological health at UCLA, and she had all these female students coming to her who were totally messed up because of the hookup culture. And how it just totally messed with their emotions, messed with their grades. And so she talks about how really the hookup culture is just completely unfair to women. And she gives a lot of really important advice and statistics. And then when Harry became Sally, so this is about the transgender moment, and this just came out last year as well. Ryan T. Anderson is just a wonderful gift to our culture. He's a national treasure, and he does so much great work. So if you're interested about this issue, he would be a good place to start, and then he'll lead you to other studies, right? So he himself is not a psychologist, right? He works for a think tank, but he's a very thorough scholar, and he really is patient, and he's just such a role model. So those books in particular I recommend. And you don't have to get the books, you can also just look up their articles. And podcasts, so Ryan T. Anderson, he's on some podcasts. Mona Sharon gets interviewed all the time. So those would be the authors that I recommend the most. But overall, again, the main point that I want to focus on is to not be afraid of the truth. A lot of people are afraid that, we discover what's true, it's going to be bad, it's going to be bad news about us. Or specifically, women, I think, are afraid of the truth because they think it's going to mean that men are somehow going to, we're going to go back to men dominating women if we find out these differences. The differences are good. The differences are beautiful. There's nothing to be afraid of. So that is it. Have a good night. Have a good week.